Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. Seventh-day Church of Revelation.
We're going to look a little bit more about the end-time prophecies, about the signs of the close of probation. We know Jesus gave his apostles a sign for the destruction of Jerusalem. There was a sign in the year 67, and the destruction did not come until the year 70, but there was a sign. So there is a sign for the close of probation. And last time, in one of the presentations, we talked about Russia and Turkey being involved and how they have an important role as a sign of close of probation. So today we're going to look into a little bit more about that, Russia. We know that Russia is interested in the territories of Ukraine, and it does not want Ukraine to be part of NATO. Back in the years of the pioneer times of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, like I was saying last time, 1870s, 1890s, there were prophetic events that they were seeing, and it was all biblical, according to Daniel chapter 11. So we're going to see what was transpiring in that time, and we're going to see if those events that happened back then are starting to arise today. So what is Russia's desire besides Ukraine? Let us look at this testament or legacy or will that Peter the Great left for Russia. We read this out of the book of Thoughts on Daniels and Revelations. This desire on the part of Russia has been cherished as a sacred legacy since the days of Peter the Great, that famous prince becoming sole emperor of Russia in 1688. At the age of 16, enjoyed a prosperous reign of 30 years to 1725 and left to his successors a celebrated last will and testament imparting certain important instructions for their constant observance. The ninth article of that will enjoined the following policy: to take every possible means of gaining Constantinople and the Indies, for he who rules there will be the true sovereign of the world. Excite war continually in Turkey and Persia. Establish fortresses in the Black Sea. Get control of the sea by degree and also of the Baltic, which is double point, necessary to the realization of our project. Accelerate as much as possible the decay of Persia. Penetrate to the Persian Gulf. Reestablish, if possible, by the way of Syria, the ancient commerce of the Levant. Advance to the Indies, which are the great depot of the world. Once there, we can do without the gold of England. Very interesting. This was transpiring in the 1890s and 1870s, like I had explained last time. This was the will that Peter the Great left Russia. Are they following this blueprint? Are they following what Peter the Great left for the leaders of Russia? Well, we're going to see that not too long ago, Turkey had an operation called Euphrates Shield. Let's look into this. Why is Russia targeting Operation Euphrates Shield area? So just like the testament or the will, it was time to ignite war in this area. A topic from last week's columns titled The Striking Coupling of Differences in Turkish-Russian Relations included Russia's ballistic missile attack on oil refineries in the Operation Euphrates Shield area in Syria. This is one of the areas that the will was mentioned. Let's continue to look. Turkey, the Eastern question is back. This was in 2016. Why was this mentioned? Let's see what this article says. Do you see a pattern here? Again, those familiar names and themes, the Crimea, Russian influence in the Middle East. times change, but geography doesn't. And strategic interests have as much to do with geography as they do with anything else. Thus, Europe now faces what might be called a new Eastern question. It was a reminder that for much of the 19th century, Western diplomacy had been obsessed with what became known as the Eastern question. This was the fear as to what might happen as the Ottoman Empire, then seen as the sick man of Europe, slowly relinquished its grip on its various possessions. Who might step into the breach? One obvious concern was Russia. Britain and France had already fought one campaign to bolster Turkey and limit Russia's influence in the Holy Land, the Crimean War of the 1850s. Ambitious from Turkey. Moscow and Ankara find themselves on different sides in the Syrian crisis. Moscow backing Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's government, and Turkey in the vanguard of those countries most eager to see his departure. A kind of proxy war has turned hot, with Russia bombing Syrian opposition groups backed by Turkey and encouraging Kurdish forces to press ever closer to the Turkish frontier. Are we seeing how these Russian leaders are following the will that Peter the Great left for Russia? Now, here we see a map of NATO. We see where the countries that have become part of NATO are surrounding Russia. So the fear of Russia is that Ukraine does not become part of NATO, because this part right here will hinder one of their goals in the Black Sea. Once he has hold of the Black Sea, or controls a good section of the Black Sea, he has a good access of one of the most cherished places on this earth. And we will see what place is that. Before we go on, one of the things that we have been mentioning is that Turkey will make its transfer, its capital, to Jerusalem. But one thing we need to understand before we continue, what is the Eastern question? Yes, it involves Turkey going to Jerusalem, but what happens before that? What was it that the pioneers were seeing and probably were seeing today? Let us read from Thoughts on Daniel and Revelation. The 11th article reads, "Interest the House of Austria in the expulsion of the Turks from Europe." This is a continuation of Peter the Great's will, and quiet their dissensions at the moment of the conquest of Constantinople, having excited war among the old states of Europe, by giving to Austria a portion of the conquest, which after will or can be reclaimed. The following facts in Russia history will show how persistently this line of policy has been followed. In 1696, Peter the Great wrested the Sea of Azov from the Turks and kept it. Next, Catherine the Great won the Crimea. In 1812, by the Peace of Bucharest, Alexander I obtained Moldavia and the prettily named province of Bessarabia, with its apples, peaches, and cherries. Then came the great Nicholas, who won the right of the free navigation of the Black Sea, the Dardanelles, and the Danube, but whose inordinate greed led him into the Crimean War, by which he lost Moldavia and the right of navigating the Danube and the unrestricted navigation of the Black Sea. This was no doubt a severe repulse to Russia, but it did not extinguish the designs upon Ottoman power, nor did it contribute in any essential degree to the stability of the Ottoman Empire. Patiently biding her time, Russia has been watching and waiting, and in 1870, when all the Western nations were watching the Franco-Prussian War, she announced to the powers that she would be no longer bound by the Treaty of 1856, which restricted her use of the Black Sea. And since that time, that sea has been, as it was 1,000 years ago, to all intents and purposes, a mare rusicum. San Francisco Chronicle. Napoleon Bonaparte well understood the designs of Russia and the importance of her contemplated movements. while a prisoner on the island of St. Helena, in conversation with his governor, Sir Hudson Lowe, he gave utterance to the following opinion. In the course of a few years, Russia will have Constantinople, part of Turkey, and all of Greece. This I hold to be as certain as if it had already taken place. All the cajolery and flattery that Alexander practiced upon me was to gain my consent to effect that object. I would not give it, foreseeing that the equilibrium of Europe would be destroyed. Once mistress of Constantinople, Russia gets all the commerce of the Mediterranean, becomes a naval power, and then God knows what may happen. The object of my invasion of Russia was to prevent this, by the interposition between her and Turkey of a new state, which I meant to call into existence as a barrier to her eastern encroachments. Kossuth also took the same view of the political board when he said, "In Turkey will be decided the fate of the world." The words of Bonaparte quoted above in reference to the destruction of the equilibrium of Europe reveal the motive which has induced the great powers to tolerate so long the existence on the continent of a nation which is false in religion, destitute of humanity, and a disgrace to modern civilization. Constantinople is regarded by general consent as the grand strategic point of Europe, and the powers have each sagacity or jealousy enough to see, or think they see, the fact that if any one of the European powers gains permanent possession of that point, as Russia desires to do, that power will be able to dictate terms to the rest of Europe. This position, no one of the power is willing that any other power should possess. And the only apparent way to prevent it is for them all to combine, by tacit or express agreement, to keep each other out, and suffer the unspeakable Turk to drag along his sickly Asiatic existence on the soil of Europe. This is preserving that balance of power over which they are all so sensitive. But this cannot always continue. He shall come to his end, and none shall help him. The sick man seems determined to reduce himself most speedily to such a degree of offensiveness that Europe will be obliged to drive him into Asia as a matter of safety to its own civilization. Now, this is very important. I'm going to read that again. The sick man seems determined to reduce himself most speedily to such a degree of offensiveness that Europe will be obliged to drive him into Asia as a matter of safety to its own civilization. So this is the desire. This is something we have been overlooking, or we have not been paying attention to. We have been mentioning Turkey making its transfer to Jerusalem. But what was the Eastern question? What is the Eastern question involved? What does it have to do with Russia and Turkey? I'm going to read to you an article that was published in 1886, and it says the following. The dream of Russia. Can any parallel instance be found in which a nation has held fast to one great idea for 1,000 years through all vicissitudes of fortune and all changes in government, religion, and civilization? And it continues to say, for 1,000 years, Russia has had a vision of Constantinople as the center of Russian power. Her first descent upon it was made in the 9th century, while still a heathen nation, and her latest in the 19th. Can any parallel instance be found in which a nation has held fast to one great idea for 1,000 years, through all vicissitudes of fortune and all changes in government, religion, and civilization? It has been called the dream of Russia. It is not a marvelously prophetic dream? The writer continues, and yet the dream of Russia is not realized. Key word right there. What is the dream of Russia? To get Constantinople. Once you get Constantinople, Turkey make its abode or transfer to Jerusalem. This is the Eastern question. So, what is Russia's desire? To grab hold of Constantinople. He continues to say, United Europe stands in the way. The possession of Constantinople will, in time, if realized, make Russia great at sea. She would have the Black Sea, the Marmara, the Mediterranean. She would next grasp at Egypt and the Indian Empire, and England, France, and Italy would be reduced to comparative insignificance, as she would then command the Danube and would crush the hated Hungarians. Austria and Germany have reason to look upon the future with solicitude. Putting off the evil day will not save them. The real contest is no longer between Russia and Turkey, but between Russia and Europe. Today we're seeing this. We're seeing how Turkey is trying to amend peace between Ukraine and Russia. We see that's the involvement of Turkey currently. But Turkey is a key player right here. It is. And Russia is afraid or worried. I don't know if to use the word afraid, but it's worried that all these other countries get involved and be part of NATO. Because then, like Ukraine becomes a member of NATO, is blocking its desire of Istanbul today. Istanbul. Remember that the sick man is sick, the sick man of the East. He has no strength. So these powers back then are sustaining, they're keeping this balance so that Russia does not gain Constantinople. It is known as the sick man. So that's why we see that the battle is Russia and the European countries. He's being very wise in regards to Turkey. Let us see what Sister White says in regards to this topic, because this was in 1886. We're going to see that all this was being happening or was happening in their time. A.G. Daniels. A.G. Daniels was another one who was preaching about the Eastern question. Let's see what she says about this. Elder Daniel speaks this evening upon the Eastern question. May the Lord give his Holy Spirit to inspire the hearts to make the truth plain. That's the key word right there. She said to make the truth plain. So she was seeing, and as the pioneer body, that this subject, the Eastern question, as they were presenting it, was truth. And we're going to see what she says about truth. But let's see what A.G. Daniels wrote in 1917 in his book, The World War. This following is found in the page on the page of this book, 73. The evidence is abundant and conclusive that the storm center of the World War, which began in 1914, is the Near East. But this is not a new storm center. It has been the center of stormy conflicts for centuries. The world war raging around this center is one more added to the many that have been fought by the European powers over the long-standing dispute as to who shall possess Constantinople, the Bosporus, and the Dardanelles. This dispute has been known during the past century as the Eastern Question. So the Eastern Questions, yes, like I had mentioned earlier, we will see Turkey transfer its capital to Jerusalem. But the center of the Eastern question is the desire that Russia has for Istanbul, as it is known today. The following is found on the same page. It says, there is no longer a Turkish empire in Europe. A strip of country around Constantinople is still held by the Sultan's troops, but all the other provinces of the Turkish Empire are in the hands of the Balkan Confederation. And now the entity allies have announced that one of their conditions of peace is the expulsion of the Turk from Europe. The decision was made when Turkey joined the Teutonic powers in their conflict with the Allied powers. It was then that Mr. Asquith, at that time Premier of Great Britain, made the following declaration for the British cabinet. It is not the Turkish people, It is the Turkish government that has drawn the sword, and I do not hesitate to predict that the government will perish by the sword. It is they, and not we, who have rung the death knell of the Ottoman dominions, not only in Europe, but in Asia. Here's another section. Following this statement by the British Premier M. Sazonov, then Premier of Russia, in announcing certain Russian victories over the Turks, said, "The radiant future of Russia on the Black Sea is beginning to dawn near the walls of Constantinople." Russia is very smart. It moves wisely. He does not let the world know its objective, just like Ukraine. What was his saying? Oh, we're just running some military exercise. And some believed it and some didn't. But now we know where we at today. That war, Russia and Ukraine. Sister White says the following, and this is 1904. Remember, the book was 1917. So this was transpiring in her time. And what does she have to say in regards to these events and with Daniel 11? The judgments of God are in the land. The wars and rumors of wars, the destruction by fire and flood, say clearly that the time of trouble, which is to increase until the end, is very near at hand. We have no time to lose. The world is stirred with the spirit of war. The prophecies of the 11th of Daniel have almost reached their final fulfillment. So, what was the sign? The sign is Russia taking possession of Constantinople back then, or as is known today as Istanbul. That is one of the signs, because when that happens, Turkey transfers its capital to Jerusalem. We don't know exactly if it's going to be by peace agreement or they're just going to be pressured to leave that area. We still don't know. But she said this in 1904. The 11th chapter of Daniel is almost fulfilled. They were seeing all these events being played out. Let us continue to see what she said about truth, as I mentioned. Because when she penned the writings about A.G. Daniels presenting the Eastern question, she said it was truth. The Word of God covers a period of history, reaching from the creation to the coming of the Son of Man in the clouds of heaven. Yea, more, it carries the mind forward to the future life and opens before it the glories of paradise restored. Through all these centuries, the truth of God has remained the same. That which was truth in the beginning is truth now. Although new and important truths appropriate for succeeding generations have been opened to the understanding, the present revealings do not contradict those of the past. Every new truth understood only makes more significant the old. The truth that they were preaching does not stop being truth. We just get hesitant, and since we don't see this fulfillment, we start to change the truth. You know, the truth about who God is not the only thing that has been changed. Prophecy has been changed. The interpretation of prophecy has been changed. And let us see what we see today. This is from the Kiev Independent, October the 9th of this year. Russia invaded Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula in February 2014 amid the deadliest days of the Euromaidan Revolution that eventually ousted pro-Russian ex-president Viktor Yanukovych. While Yanukovych's pro-Russian regime was murdering protesters in downtown Kiev, around 30,000 Russian troops crossed into Crimea, taking hold of the peninsula by early March 2014. This event effectively began Russia's ongoing war against Ukraine. The Russian military has continued to occupy Crimea ever since. Just like the will of Peter the Great, they're following the blueprint. They know what they're doing. They are following this testament that Peter the Great left. Let us continue to see more. This is from the U.S. Department of Defense. U.S. official looks to deter Russia in Black Sea region. This is of May 19th of this year. The Black Sea is a crucial crossroads for the world, one that is critically challenged, said Mara Karlin, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy, Plans, and Capabilities. Karlin, who spoke at the Black Sea and Balkan Security Forum in Bucharest, Romania, knows well how crucial the region is and spoke of how it fits into the U.S. national defense strategy. We are seeing this being played out. We've been more expecting Turkey to make its vote in Jerusalem. But what leads to that is the important thing, and we're seeing this play out today. Here's another article. This was in the April 7th of 2023. The U.S. and NATO seek to blunt Putin's Black Sea ambitions. The war in Ukraine exposes a vulnerable seam into NATO's strategy. Allowing Russia to define the rules of the Black Sea puts our allies and interests at risk, and it deserves its own comprehensive strategy to ensure that Russian President Vladimir Putin cannot gain a foothold there. Senator Jan Shahin, a senior Democratic lawmaker, told Foreign Policy. They know this is an important area. They're trying to keep peace. They're trying to keep this area away from Russia. They know the importance of this area of the Black Sea. Once Russia gets a hold of this, very close to Istanbul. Remember, the legacy was to conquer Constantinople, like Peter the Great wrote, known as today as Istanbul. Let us continue. These are very important articles that we're looking at, and here we see a map. We see the key point that Russia is interested. Just like said, the Bosporus, the Black Sea, Crimea, all these are very important. Now, the modern treaty controlling access is the 1936 Montreal Convention regarding the regime of the Straits, which remains in force as of 2023. This convention gives the Republic of Turkey control over warships entering the Straits but guarantees the free passage of civilian vessels in peacetime. Another article. This is August 16, 2023, this year. This is from Reuters. Russian raid off Turkey's coast tests Erdogan's resolve. They are very smart. Let us see this article right here. Russia's raid on a ship just off Turkey's coast brings the fallout from the Ukraine war to another NATO frontier and raises the stakes as Ankara seeks to coax Moscow back to a grain export deal that will restore some calm to the Black Sea. Armed Marines raided the Turkish-based vessel via helicopter on Sunday, some 60 kilometers or 37 miles off Turkey's northwest coast, in international waters, but near Istanbul, in what Moscow called an inspection before it sailed on to Ukraine. What are they inspecting? See, these are little key things that God's people should be looking at. There were key things that the people should have seen before they invaded Ukraine, and these are key things that we, students of prophecy, those who are interested in prophecy and want to know when probation is to close, should be looking after. They are very wise what they're doing. Continue to say, this type of aggression being exercised so close to Istanbul went unchecked and doesn't respect Turkey's overall rights, said Yorick Isaac, an Istanbul-based geopolitical analyst at the Bosphorus Observer Consultancy. Ankara's silence is strange, but shows it is still counting on Putin to visit and return to the grain deal. Since Russia exited the agreement last month, both it and Ukraine have issued warnings and carried out attacks on vessels off their coast, stirring worries that commercial shipping could grow riskier across the entire sea. Again, we see this map. They were very close to this area. They know what's the objective. They want to fulfill Peter the Great's desire to conquer this area because, like they said, whoever controls this area controls all the commerce. We know what happened when the Nord Stream pipeline bursted, right? Or they were destroyed. How these European countries were dependent on Russia. Now imagine if Russia takes possession of this area. Let us continue to see to more articles that are being released for us today who want to know how close probation is to close. Turkish neutrality, how Erdogan manages ties with Russia, Ukraine amid war. The West is reliable. Russia is equally reliable. The Turkish president said in a recent interview, a comment that reflects his delicate balancing act. Turkey very well knows that he needs to keep this area balanced, keep it safe, not agitate Russia, because they don't want to lose this area. I think they know they're vulnerable. They're the sick man of the East. Remember, they are being sustained by the European powers. This was in September 28th of this year. In Recep Tayyip Erdogan's opinion, Russia and the West are equally reliable and trustworthy. That is what the Turkish president said on September the 18th, commenting on the collective West's dependability and on his frustration with Turkey's long-stalled attempts to join the European Union. It says right here, Mr. Putin is on the side of ending this war as soon as possible. That's what he said, and I believe his remarks, Erdogan said. Erdogan may appear to sound naive, but he is directing a careful balancing act between the warring sides, the West, China, and his own domestic audience. This is being played out. And now, what just happened this week? You know, Russia is they're friends with Iran, and they remember what Peter the Great, his will left, the will that he left. He said, agitate war between Turkey and Syria, and they're friends with Iran. Iran supplies to Syria, and they also don't like Israel. So what happened right now? A new war just began. It says right here, Netanyahu says Israel at war after Hamas terrorists unleash major attack, killing 40 plus. This is the day of the greatest battle to end the last occupation on earth, he said in a broadcast on Hamas media, saying that 5,000 rockets had been launched. Enough is enough, Deef, who does not appear in public, said in the recorded message, as he called on Palestinians from East Jerusalem to northern Israel to join the fight. Today, the people are regaining their revolution. In a televised address, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant warned that Hamas had made a grave mistake and promised that the state of Israel will win this war. We understand that this is something big, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hecht, an Israeli army spokesman, told reporters. He said the Israeli military had called up the army reserves. Turkey's Erdogan strikes a moderate stance as Israel-Hamas war rages. Turkey's Erdogan is striking a neutral stance in the Gaza conflict, avoiding incendiary rhetoric that would derail his charm offensive with the West and offering to mediate between Israel and Hamas. So we're seeing how this is being played out again. This is very important because Gaza is calling all the Muslims to join this battle. We know that Turkey wants Jerusalem. Russia wants Istanbul. NATO is trying to keep Russia away from Istanbul. This is the sign. So why is this so important? I'm going to read to you the following from one of the pioneers. This treaty was signed, and the ultimatum was officially put in the power of Mehmet Ali on August 11, 1840. Since that time, Turkey has been known everywhere as the sick man of the East. Daniel prophesied concerning him, saying, he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. At any moment, when the jealous powers of Europe can decide, either peaceably or in battle. Which one of them shall occupy Constantinople? The sick man will speedily take his departure from Europe. That movement, for which nations are now on the margin alert, will be the sign of still more important changes in the heavenly court. This is why it's important. He continues to say, the importance of the prophecy and the exactness with which it was fulfilled to the very day should lead to a careful investigation of that divine history, which circles about the years 1840 to 1844. Its study will lead men to look for changes in the heavens as well as upon earth. For when the capital of Turkey is removed to Palestine, then Christ, finishing his work in the sanctuary, throws his censure on the earth as a signal for the final dissolution of all things. When this is done, probation ends. And we have seen how history is repeating. Russia was about to conquer Constantinople back then, and today it's starting to make its move again. Sister White called this the truth when A.G. Daniels spoke about it. Even Uriah Smith, she said this was truth. And if it was truth back then, truth does not change. The truth that most of us talk about of being a continuous truth is only regards to the one true God. But she also says the same thing about prophecy. Prophecy was truth back then and should remain truth today. Let us continue to read. Between the seas and the glorious holy mountain refers unmistakably to Jerusalem, located between the Dead Sea and the Mediterranean. Palestine is Turkish territory, and the Mohammedan, equally with the Christian, regards Jerusalem as holy ground. And what is more natural than that, driven from Europe and fired by religious fanatism, the Turks should make the city of David his capital? But such a transfer of the Ottoman seat of government will by no means settle the Eastern question. It will only change its form. Turkish hate and fanaticism will beget like feelings in Christian breasts, and Christendom will demand the expulsion of the Turk from the holy city. He shall come to his end, and none shall help him. And what then? Let the prophecy answer. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never once since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Sister White wrote the following. The Savior's prophecy concerning the visitation of judgments upon Jerusalem is to have another fulfillment, of which that terrible desolation was but a faint shadow. The Lord wishes all to understand his providential dealings now, just now, in the time in which we live. There must be no long discussions, no presenting of new theories in regard to prophecies that God has already made plain. The great work from which the mind should not be diverted is the consideration of our personal standing in the sight of God. Are our feet on the rock of ages? Are we hiding ourselves in the only refuge? The storm is coming. Relentless is his fury. There should be no new interpretation. God led his people back then. But today, sadly, they are changing this interpretation of prophecy, which is a literal interpretation given by Gabriel to Daniel in Daniel chapter 11. She says the following. It is true that there are prophecies yet to be fulfilled, but very erroneous work has been done again and again, and will continue to be done by those who seek to find new light in the prophecies and who begin by turning away from the light that God has already given. The true workers with Jesus Christ are to cooperate with their brethren who have had an experience in the work from the very rise of the third angel's message. This followed on step by step, receiving light and truth as they advanced, bearing one test after another, lifting the cross that lay directly in their pathway, and pressing on to know the Lord, whose goings forth are prepared as the morning. You and others of our brethren must accept the truth as God has given it to his students of prophecy, as they have been led by a genuine living experience, advancing point by point, tested, proved, and tried, until the truth is to them a reality. From their voices and pens, the truth in bright warm rays has gone to all parts of the world, and that which was to them testing truth, as brought by the Lord's delegated messengers, is testing truth to all to whom this message is proclaimed. Let us not change. Let us stay with this interpretation that the pioneers have studied through. They knew and they were guided by the Spirit of God. In fact, Sister White says this in regards to a special book. Those who are preparing to enter the ministry, who desire to become successful students of the prophecies, will find Daniel and the Revelation an invaluable help. They need to understand this book. It speaks of past, present, and future, laying out the path so plainly that none need err therein. Those who will diligently study this book will have no relish for the cheap sentiments presented by those who have a burning desire to get out something new and strange to present to the flock of God. The rebuke of God is upon all such teachers, those who are coming with new ideas. They need that one teach them what is meant by godliness and truth, the great essential questions which God would have presented to the people are found in Daniel and the Revelation. There is found solid, eternal truth for this time. Everyone needs the light and information it contains. Let us listen to this. It is a rebuke to those who are walking contrary to the truth that already has been established by the pioneers. And to lay it out so simple for us, God in his mercy used the author of the book, Thoughts on Daniel and Revelations. It's a set of quotes that were laid a place in this book, the thoughts of many of the pioneers, and God guided Uriah Smith. And as we read from A.G. Daniels, this was a continuation. Let us not be God's people who lacks faith. Let's wait for his prophecies to be fulfilled. She said the following: a shadow is resting over Jerusalem, a terrible shadow, which I have no desire to come under. Everywhere a curse is visible, which I have no desire to look upon. I can see marks of the curse everywhere. To be able to say I have visited Jerusalem would not shed a distinct ray of light upon one soul. It would not enable me better to tell men and women what they must do to be saved. I present the Word of God in truth. I listen to the precious lessons which Christ gave his disciples. Let us read Exodus. Let us study every chapter of Exodus so that we could see how God led his people, how he wanted all the possessions, all the talent of God's people to be consecrated to him, even his children. And when we go to chapter 33, we're going to see what God asked of his people before meeting him. You know, all these captivities that took place with Israel was because they were in apostasy. And we see apostasy today. We see how God's people have strayed away from the truth. and is going deeper and deeper into a more apostasy. And it has to stop. And we need to get close to God. We need to reason with Him. We need to ask for forgiveness. Because just like the Israel of old, his remnant also suffered. And in this time, the judgment will be upon God's people. And it says that judgments are to begin in the house. And all the other nations are going to face judgment. But this is Jacob's trouble, the great tribulation that those who are God's people must go through. Let us pray. Let us get closer to Him. Because as we've seen in this news article of today, history is being repeated again. They are signs that point to when Michael shall stand up and step out of the most holy place. If we don't have these signs, if we're not seeing them, if God did not lay this out, we will be in complete darkness and not know when Christ comes out. But in His great mercy, He has left a sign so that we can get ready. Let us get ready.
If you've been blessed by this video, please like, subscribe, and comment below. To support Seventh-day Church of Revelation, visit revelation.org.